Okay, it's time. Welcome everyone to class. I believe this is class number 32 of our Medicine Master Buddha Sutra exploration. Today we have Guan to request for Dharma. Are you ready, Guan?
Yes, Master.
Okay, I'm going to invite everyone to join me in putting your palms together. And Guan, when you are ready, you can begin.
恭敬大德圣境，为此法会集一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我如何了生脱世，离苦得乐，修成无生。Woe the somehow with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, listen the wonderful Dharma way to teach us how to live suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati sanmiao sanputo 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Hello, everyone. Welcome back again this week. Um, we have the 7-day Amitabha session going on at in the Buddha Hall downstairs here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So some of our friends that we usually see online, either they're physically downstairs if they are volunteering or participating. If not, then they might be tuning into the Amitabha session from home. Okay, let's continue with reciting Medicine Master Buddha's name 7 times. Namo, quelling disasters, slanting life, Medicine Master Buddha. 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 Medicine master does come one. 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 Okay. I see Randy is with us today. Randy, I know you asked a question last week and I didn't, how you say, I read your question and I wanted to answer it, but I ran out of time. So what I'll do is towards the end of today's class, I will circle back to your question. And if anyone else has any questions, could you please, as usual, type it into the chat box. Okay, let me end this slideshow. Okay, and share the slides for today's class. Okay, so just a quick recap. And Randy, this is this has to answers part of your question. Last week we spoke. Okay, so the week before we talked about we went through Shufu's instructions for us on vows, and we are still continuing with that today. The remainder of that. So if you remember, we talked about how we can look at vows as if precepts are the traffic rules on when you're driving, so that to keep yourself safe. You know, when you stop at a red traffic, when you see the traffic light turn red, you know to stop. When it's green, you go. When it's orange or yellow, you slow down. And lines on the road is to tell you to stay in your lane, keeps you safe. Using that metaphor, then vows are our directions. Vows gives us a sense of where we want to go. It makes us examine who we are, who we want to be or end up as, and our vows are framed on those intentions. And then last week we also talked about how important right view is, because in Buddhism, if you look at the Noble Eightfold Path, in Buddhism, everything starts with right view. So Randy's question was about how do we strengthen our faith. Faith in Buddhism, and as how I understood Shufu taught faith, wasn't the same faith as practiced in other religions, where you have a complete confidence in an um, external force or external, like God, for example, and you surrender everything to that God. Faith in Buddhism means slightly different. It means confidence. What kind of confidence? Well, it's confidence you get from the Buddha's teachings, because from the Buddha's teachings, it tells you what you need to do. So that's right view. And then confidence in yourself, because as you put that right view into practice, you learn more about yourself. You learn sometimes things are not so easy. You learn how to wrestle with your own afflictions. But as the more you try and the more you do, you'll be successful. Slowly, you will change. And as you change, you gain more confidence. And as your confidence grows, so will your understanding, which you put back into your practice. Your practice benefits from, I'm sorry, let me see. Practice, understanding, you put into practice. From practice, you gain a deeper sense of understanding, which itself informs a deeper level of practice. So the more you do, the more natural things become, because of cause and effect. And your habits change. You change to be, you gradually change to the person you want to be. So that's, so Randy, I think I just answered your question. You first have to start with right view. And right view will lead you through a proper way of, to the proper path for everything else that you do. Okay, so okay, let's continue with today's class. So last week, let me see, what did we do? We talked about living beings are boundless. Okay, just let me open. Okay, I'm going to just close this very quickly. Okay, and I just want to, okay, let me start again. Okay, so what you see in front of you in that screen is from last week's class. Okay, Shufu's unsurpassed Dharma Doan. Because today we're going to go through the remainder four, let's just read through this slide. So the first vow is living beings are boundless. I vow to save them all. Shufu says that living beings within the mind are limitless, but our first concerns are the deviant and confused living beings, which should be taken across by means of proper wisdom. The deceitful and false living beings, which should be taken across by means of humility. The unwholesome living beings, which should be taken across by means of goodness. The jealous living beings, which should be taken across by means of respectfulness. So if you see some of this, and if you don't really understand, like, oh, how do I, like the second one, the deceitful and false living beings, which should be taken across by means of humility. If you don't really understand how to do that, that's why you need right view or proper understanding. Then once you understand the theory, you put it into practice by trying to be a humble person, and then you realize it's not so easy for some people like myself, and then you try and you try and you try, and then slowly your understanding grows. So wisdom and practice. Okay, all right, let's move on to, let me check my notes to see if we covered everything. Okay, yes, let's move on to today's slide. Okay, so the second vow is afflictions are endless. I vow to cut them off. Okay, there might be, you might come across a slightly different version of this vow. I vow to cut off, I vow to cut them all off. It means the same thing. So affliction, Shufu says, afflictions never end, but you must cut them off. Actually, cut off means change. Change your afflictions into bodhi. Afflictions are actually bodhi. What is bodhi? Bodhi means wisdom, understanding. Okay. So Shufu says afflictions are actually bodhi, and if you cut off all afflictions, you cut off bodhi. If you cut off all afflictions, you would become a Buddha, and you don't want to do just that yet, do you? So leave just a hair's worth of afflictions and transform the rest into bodhi. Use genuine prajna wisdom to get rid of affliction and cast out all vain, false, deviant, and ignorant thoughts. Okay. Okay, let me see if I can try to dissect what Shufu said. So Shufu says, change your afflictions into bodhi. Afflictions are actually bodhi. And if you cut off all afflictions, you cut off bodhi. I think what Shufu is trying to say is that our afflictions come from within, from ourselves. It comes from our habitual nature of the way we see things, the way we react when things happen around us. We have expectations of how people should be, for example. And if people do not meet those expectations, we get upset. And that itself is an affliction. And which is really good, because every time you see yourself losing patience, getting upset, what else? Getting jealous, getting angry. What else? There's a whole list of afflictions. Envy. You want something that other people have. You know, you get jealous of people's success. All those are opportunities for you to, if you understand what practice is all about, you realize that every time you have an affliction, that's where you practice. That's where you apply yourself. We tend to have the idea that practice is, for example, reciting mantras, reciting the Buddha's name, bowing. Yes, that's part of practice, and that's very helpful because it calms the mind down. It reduces false thinking, And if you apply yourself well during those moments, you can identify your afflictions. But there's another whole part of practice that is very active in the mind, and that is constantly being aware of what's going on in yourself. So last week we spoke about mindfulness as we practice, as if your practice is bowing or reciting the mantra. Look back at yourself over the years and see if you have changed, but in a better way, if you have reduced your afflictions. If not, then re-examine your whole approach to practice, your own understanding of what you think practice is. Because if you're not reducing your afflictions by confronting them and changing yourself, because afflictions come from inside, and usually how the opposite of that is what people normally do. They blame their afflictions on everything outside. They blame it on the weather, they blame it on public transportation, they may blame it on the immigration department, they blame it on politicians, they blame it on everyone around them, but they don't look inside. They don't examine where they don't examine the true source of where the afflictions come from. So Shufu has this saying, he says, don't be a camera, because a camera can take pictures, which is outside of itself, but a camera can never take a picture of itself. Okay. So afflictions are infinite. I want to cut them off. Shufu says we have to reverse afflictions and transform them into bodhi. If we haven't, then quickly turn them over right away. And then the sixth patriarch says that it is to use the prajna wisdom of your own self-nature to cast out the vain and false thoughts in your mind. So sixth patriarch say, prajna wisdom of your own self-nature to cast out the vain and false thoughts in your mind. So it's a very internal process. You are paying a lot of attention to yourself and trying to figure out what's wrong with you and what's the best way to overcome it. Okay. I have a personal story about not cutting off afflictions, but dealing with afflictions, and it has to do with bowing. I find that when I get afflicted with people, if there is someone or a group of people who I find to be, usually it is, I think they're doing something wrong. You know, they are not following, in my mind, they're not either not following the rules, or they are irritating. You know, they're not behaving as who they should be, or they're not doing the things that I think that someone like them should be doing. I get afflicted. And what happens when I get afflicted? I could be in a Buddha hall during the ceremony, but instead of concentrating on the ceremony, I'm thinking about them. I could be sitting down, but instead of meditating, I'm thinking about them and getting upset. When I do my mantra recitation, instead of concentrating on the mantra, I'm still doing the mantra, but half my mind or 3/4 of my mind is thinking about all the mistakes, so-called mistakes, that these people are doing, and I'm getting afflicted. So that's what happens to me during those times. And I don't like that. Because why? I am not in control. It makes me upset. And it also makes me ashamed, because that's not how I think someone who is studying or learning the Dharma should behave internally in their minds. So what is my solution? Well, I learned a long time ago how powerful bowing can be. So what I would do is I would bow to these people in my mind. And as I bow to them, I just you would have to come up with your own way if this is something you're interested in. But my theory about bowing and why it's so powerful came for me trying to understand two things. First is when I learned that Shufu, as he grew up, one of his practices was bowing in the morning, and Shufu would bow to everyone. If you are familiar with the story, Shufu used to bow. I don't remember how many bows he would bow, but he would take hours, at least 2 hours. He would first bow to his parents, and then he would bow to all the I think the ghost spirits, living beings, and all throughout the 10 directions. And I never quite understood that. And then uh, one day Shufu was asked a question like, "Why do people bow to you?" And Shufu's answer was, "Because I have bowed to them in the past." And again, I never really understood that. And then the second thing I don't quite understand is the sorry, I got distracted reading Peggy's question. Everyone can see Peggy's question in the chat box, which we'll come to towards the end. The second story I didn't understand was the story of never slighting Bodhisattva. I'm not sure what his name is, the actual name. It was translated as that, and he is the person in the story in the sutra. I don't, was it the Lotus Sutra? Or and Shufu gave us that story as well, where he would bow to people. So never sliding Bodhisattva would bow to people, but people would look at him as a freak. Imagine if you walk on the street and someone were to come to bow at your feet, how would you feel? First, some people might feel embarrassed because other people are staring, and because they feel embarrassed, they feel the need to get angry, to because they get embarrassed. That's getting angry at being embarrassed is sometimes a very natural response for many people. So what would they do? They take the anger out on never sliding Bodhisattva. They would abuse him physically or throw rocks at him. And then when never sliding Bodhisattva realized that, oh, that wasn't very skillful, he will bow to them from far away. He says, "Oh, in the future, you're going to be a Buddha, so I'm going to bow to you right now." So I never really understood that at all until I tried it out. And I think my theory is that to in order to save a living being, if you are unable to bow to that living being, I don't think you can do anything to save that living being. Let me see if I say that right. Okay, well, I don't mean that to save a living being you have to bow to the living being. Bowing is a prerequisite, but what I mean is that if bowing does something to soften the heart, it removes the barriers that we create internally in ourselves that lead us to discriminate, to judge, to have expectations, and to treat people through rules and guidelines or whatever, how you say, unskillful ways, instead of seeing people at the level of their Buddha nature. So normally how we see people is we look at the outside, we look at the things that they do, we look at them through our own expectations of what they should be doing. I find that bowing has a way to remove all that, and it helps the relationship to be less conditional, where there's less judgment, less anger, or jealousy, or any of those unskillful thoughts. So if you want to save someone and you have those kind of thoughts or feelings towards that person, there is no way you can save them because you always get upset with them. And the afflictions come from inside you, not from anywhere else. It doesn't come from the way someone else behaves, because there are some people who, if they are friends, you can tolerate a lot of behavior from them. But if they're not, then you get very critical for someone else for the exact same behavior. We see it all the time in this world, especially in politics. but let's not go there. So I think bowing is I'm slowly beginning to unravel like bowing, and I'm getting a different perspective on never sliding bodhisattva and Shufu's bowing practice, and I find that it helps me a lot. People who I have difficulty with, when I bow to them, the difficulties go away. Yeah, and it's very helpful. At least, if anyone benefits, is yourself, because then, like in my case, after doing the bowing, my mind doesn't go so crazy anymore, and I can concentrate on what I'm doing instead. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Okay, this is the third of the 4 great vows. The third one says, Dharma doors are measureless. I vow to learn them all. So Shufu says, recognize your mind, see your original nature, and always practice the right Dharma, not the wrong. You may study the Buddha Dharma in detail, but if you do not practice it, it is not true study. True Buddhist studies include both study and practice. For example, people who used to smoke, drink, and take drugs no longer do so once they have studied the Buddha Dharma. They do not even eat meat. Those who were lazy and did nothing but sleep from morning to night and from night to morning now read and translate sutras, listen to lectures, and meditate vigorously without a thought of sleeping. This is true study. So Shufu says, ask yourself, he says there are like 4 questions you can ask yourself. He say, have you learned any Dharma? Do you understand what the Buddha is trying to teach you? That's number 1. Number 2, have you brought forth any resolve or any strength for Buddhism? And that could be both inside yourself, and it could be outside. So Randy, are you still there? If you're there, this is it should also answer part of your question. And the Shua says, number 3, have you been too rigid or inflexible in your study of the teachings? What is that? That is to take the Dharma as the law, being rigid and inflexible, saying that, oh, Shufu said this, therefore everyone has to follow. But the Dharma always has context, because the Dharma is always spoken to a particular person or a group of people at a particular time for a particular culture, a particular society. And it doesn't mean that what is applicable then has to be applicable all the time. So the Dharma is all based on skillful means. Skillful means, what are skillful means? Skillful means that you understand the principle, and through the principle you are able to apply it to different situations depending on the condition of the situation, depending on the person. So you could have 2 people asking the same question, but they both deserve different answers, which may be contradictory. Why? Because they both have different assumptions, different habits, and different personalities that come through that the teacher is trying to address. I hope people get that. Yeah. So in that case, what's the principle? The principle is the teacher trying to break the student's attachments. And because the student has different attachments or assumptions when they ask a question, that's what the teacher is addressing. So that 2 people asking the same question get a different answer for each of them, because that's what they needed to hear individually. Okay. For someone who doesn't understand that, who thinks that the Dharma is rigid and inflexible, then will think that the teacher is confused or inconsistent, or they may take the answer for the first student and try to apply it for the second student, which becomes unskillful, because then the teachings are not suitable anymore. Okay, so if you have read the Six Petrarch Sutra, you realize that a lot of it is all about skillful teachings. And then the fourth one, Shufu says, is it the case that my study of Dharma doors is off and on, meaning you are not consistent in your effort? Shufu says that if you, I think he was talking to the monks, like if you even relax off a bit, it's like falling down a mountain and then you have to climb all the way back up. So constantly have a constant practice that you do all the time. So what Sixth Petrarch says about Dharma doors are measureless and I vow to learn them all. He says very easy. He says true study is just always practicing the right Dharma. That's it. True study is always practicing the right Dharma. And what does that mean? Well, just like we talked about last week, we practice, we put theory into experience, which is how you actually learn and transform, and then you get better, and then you do it again. Okay. All right. Let me see Peggy's question. How do I scroll up? It says, okay, Peggy says, Fashu, if to cut off affliction, we become Buddha, then how afflictions are Bodhi? Well, at that time, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Bodhi is no longer Bodhi. You are just having your Buddha awareness. Yeah. And Ms. Yap says, is afflictions from external only or can it occur as well as internal? What about affliction beyond our control? There is no such thing as afflictions coming from external. It could be the trigger of how you feel, you know, like say someone not wearing a mask makes you upset. So okay, hold on, let me see who can I mute. Okay. So the triggers could be external because our afflictions also depend on our conditions, how our karma arises, which can be a source of where our afflictions come from. You can call that karma. And how those seeds of karma arise depends on the conditions and the environment we put ourselves in. And so, yes, from that aspect, you can say that afflictions can be external. But what karma also teaches us, or cause and effect, is that how we react is our responsibility. So if you see someone not wearing a mask, okay, fine. How you react to that is totally under your control, although it may not seem like it because most people don't pay attention to that aspect of themselves. They don't realize or they don't want to see that or to accept that how they react is their responsibility. So it's always easier to blame an external happening or person for how you react. Everyone does that all the time. That's what happens in the world. And so it takes away, when you blame something outside of you, it takes the responsibility away from you. It makes your affliction justified. But at the end of the day, you are the one who gets afflicted. So it's you losing out. You know, you might get angry and direct your anger at that person, but it's you getting angry, it's you getting upset. When you go home, it's you upsetting the rest of the family or holding that grudge, being unable to sleep. All that happens to you and no one else. So being skillful means that learning what goes on inside you that makes you get afflicted when you see someone not wearing a mask, and owning up to the responsibility and trying all the ways in the Dharma to overcome your own shortcomings. Like for me, for certain things, it is bowing to people. For other people, it's something else. So the Buddha actually gives a whole list. There is something called subduing hatred. And he says that if a person has, say you meet someone, they do something good, but everything else they do is bad, and it makes you upset, he says just concentrate on the good thing and ignore the bad thing. And so he gives, I think there's 4 or 5 scenarios. I have to look up the sutta again. I can share it in the WhatsApp group. And then there's a case where he says, because that was a question in my mind. I had, when I was reading that sutra, I had a question in my mind: what if a person, everything that they do is not right? What do you do then? Yeah. Because when you're afflicted, that's how you see people sometimes. You know, when I don't like particular person, everything they do is wrong. You know, there's nothing right that they can do. And at the end of that sutra, the Buddha actually addresses that question. I think the Buddha said something like, I've been meaning to revisit that sutra because it's very helpful. So towards the end, the Buddha said something like, okay, if you come across someone who doesn't do anything right, uh, then I think you use not pity but sympathy. You sympathize with that person. You try to bring forth compassion, um, and kindness. And because, say, if you see someone doing a lot of unskillful things, from a view of cause and effect, this person is only creating a lot of suffering for for themselves, both in the present as well as in their own futures. So when you see someone like that who's doing it without even knowing, and in their next life, when they forget everything, all they know is suffering. All they can see is that life is really unfair. You know, so when we are reborn, we forget everything that we've done, but our karma still stays with us. So how can you get angry with a person like that? How can you say, oh, you deserve it because in your past life you did all these terrible things? Because the person doesn't remember. So it would be really unfair and really cruel to subject them to think that they deserve something that they themselves don't remember. Because if someone were to do that to me, I would feel really hopeless and helpless. So yeah, but I did that before when I didn't know anything. So now instead of being so cruel to me, can you help me instead? That would be my response. So the Buddha says, use that kind of perspective on someone that you think does nothing right. Let me find the exact sutra instead of me trying to paraphrase, trying to guess. Uh, let me find the exact sutta and I'll share it by this week with the group, the WhatsApp group. Okay, so Ms. Yap, you says that afflictions external or can they occur as internal? The trigger can be external, but we are always responsible for how we behave. So the true source of affliction comes from inside you, not from outside. Okay, all right. Okay, let's go to the next slide that I have. And this is the fourth of the 4 great vows that Shufu says all bodhisattvas make. And which means if you in the future want to be a bodhisattva or you want to be a practicing bodhisattva now, then you should try your best to figure out these 4 vows to the best of your ability and put it into practice. So what's number 4? Number 4 is, oh, excuse me. Number 4 is the Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to realize it. So Shufu says something a bit cryptic. Shufu says all living beings can cross themselves over. No one needs to take them across, which is a bit contradictory to vowing to save all living beings. But let's carry on. Shufu says to realize Buddhahood, one must first begin from the ground up with a humble mind. Do not brag. Look at me. He says, just practice the true and proper Dharma with a contrite heart and in a modest manner. And then, having made these vows, you may practice and cultivate them in every thought. Okay. So Shufu expands more. He says there is no Dharma on earth that surpasses the Buddha's way. That means being a Buddha is the best potential that you have. There is nothing else that can measure to you realizing your full potential, which in other words is being a Buddha. Shufu says that's the ultimate. So Shufu says, have you He's asking us, he says, have you made a resolve yet to accomplish Buddhahood? He says, have you, meaning, have you made a promise that you want to be your best, that you want to discover your all the wholesomeness inside you and uncover it? And then Shiva says, what's more, he says, don't be selfish. He says, don't resolve to accomplish Buddhahood for ourselves alone, but to take all living beings across to Buddhahood. Okay, what does this feel like? Well, I remember when I was working in Kuala Lumpur, sometimes you come across or someone introduce you to a restaurant, and this restaurant is very special. They have a dish that you have not tried elsewhere. I remember, let me see, there's this specific restaurant in Auckland Road in Kuala Lumpur that had a dish that I never actually had anywhere else before. It was a Hokkien dish, and because my family is Hokkien, it had special meaning. It's kind of like a, what do you call it? I don't remember the name. It's like a brownish. It's like a noodle, like broad noodle, like kway teow, but it's brown in color and it's more chewy. And they fried like fried noodles. And because it was special, it was different, and was also really tasty. You have the wish that you come across something like that, you want to share it with people, something like that, So Shufu says, in your resolve to, David says chao fan. No, David, this is a Hokkien dish. Yeah. Just think of kway teow that's brown before you fry it, something like that. And it's very hard to find, David. Yeah. Okay. So Shufu says, as when you make the resolve to want to accomplish Buddhahood, or you want to be the best that you can be, he says, don't forget other people as well. Okay. And so Sixth Petra reiterates, he says that always practice with a humble mind. Don't think that because you have resolved to want to be at your best or the Buddha, then you become proud that, oh, I want to be a Buddha. Look at me. I want to save all living beings. I want to save you. That's the total opposite of what it means to be the Buddha. Sixth Petra also says that this is where you separate from both confusion and enlightenment, and always give rise to prajna. So, Peggy, this is related to your question. Separate yourself from both confusion and enlightenment. Wait, let me see. Is that right? Separate yourself from both confusion and enlightenment. I think you can take these two ways. If your understanding is strong enough, then you can say that you go beyond duality, and then you leave both concepts of confusion and enlightenment behind. Or you can say, like in my case, what makes more sense to me right now is to look at it as confusion and wisdom. Take enlightenment as wisdom, and then we look at moments where I'm confused, and look at moments where it's skillful or based on wisdom behavior, and always give rise to prajna. How to do this? Well, we talk about taking refuge. How do we go? How do we separate confusion and enlightenment or bodhi? Well, most of us here have taken refuge. What does refuge mean? Well, in a manner of speaking, refuge is what you do when the weather turns crazy. It's been raining cats and dogs in Kuala Lumpur. So what do? You run inside. You take shelter. There's a lot of lightning. Just yesterday, I was standing at the window, and the lightning was really near. Like, you see the light, and almost immediately you hear the thunder, which means that it's really close. And because it's near, it's really loud, and that made me take 2 steps back from the window. So we take refuge indoors. Okay, when it's outside and it's really hot and the sun is beating down on you, you take refuge in the shade. Okay, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha means that instead of taking refuge when we have problems, when we have to make decisions in the world, like what career to pursue, should I take this job, what should I study, You look towards the Buddha's wisdom for guidance instead of worldly ways. What are worldly ways? For example, this job involves harming living beings, but it pays 5 times more. What should I do? Okay, you don't know, you're confused. So instead of following worldly ways of where money confuses you, you follow the Buddha's wisdom that says that harming living beings is no good. So if you take this job and you, you are committing yourself in a certain sense to either that business or that you open the business that harms living beings, that may give you short-term gains, but in the future you may want to change your decision because as your understanding of the Dharma grows, you realize that you're not doing something that's good for yourself or your family, but by that time it may be really hard. So that's one way of looking at what it means when we say take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that's one way to understand what the sixth petra means by separating confusion and enlightenment. So in all the decisions that we want to make in life, we use the Buddha's wisdom to guide us. When we have problems, instead of drinking our problems and trying to forget our problems and not dealing with them, taking drugs and all these things, instead we rely on transforming ourselves so that the source of affliction, which comes from within, gets resolved. Then no more problem. Okay. Sixth Petra also says that when we cast out the true and the false, you see your nature and realize the Buddha way at the very moment it is spoken of. It says, always be mindful, cultivate the Dharma that possesses the power of this vow. So the sixth Petra is encouraging people to make these 4 vows. And yes, what you heard, it says, when you cast out the true and the false, meaning, so true and false both belong to at the level of duality, is not prajna yet. Then when you enter into prajna wisdom, even notions of true and false fall away. And he says that that's the time you see your nature and you realize the Buddha way. Okay. So if you look at your screen, it says humble mind, right? Shiva says to realize Buddhahood, one must first begin from the ground up, meaning you have a solid foundation. Where do you get that solid foundation? From right view. You have to understand what you're doing. Don't practice blindly. All right. And as you're practicing, always pay attention to what's going on in your mind. So Shufu actually takes a bit of time to talk about the humble mind. So Shufu says, look at the Earth Store Sutra if you want to understand what it means to have a humble mind. So what does the Earth Store Sutra says about this? I'm going to, okay, let me see if I can, maybe I should put it up on the screen. Okay, let me see. I'm going to end the slideshow. Okay, I am going to copy this text. And then I'm going to paste. Oops. And I should have thought about this earlier. Okay, and then I'm going to make the text smaller. Okay, and then I'm going to show everyone this text. Okay, so Shufu says the Earth Store Sutra says, okay, this is an excerpt from the Earth Store Sutra. It says the Buddha told Earth Store Bodhisattva, perhaps there are kings of countries in Jambudvipa or noblemen, great ministers, great elders, great Kshatriyas, great Brahmans, and the rest who encounter the tired, the poor, and those who are hunchbacked, crippled, dumb, mute, deaf, mentally challenged, that's instead of retarded, that's mentally challenged, the more accepted term now, eyeless, as well as all others who are handicapped or disabled. Perhaps these kings and great men will wish to give and will be able to do so with great compassion, a humble heart, and a smile. Perhaps they will give personally with their own hands or arrange for others to give, speaking gentle and sympathetic words. Such kings and others will obtain blessings comparable to the meritorious virtue they will gain by giving to Buddhas as numerous as the sand grains in 100 river Ganges. Okay, so Shofu uses this encounter in the Earth Store Sutra for us to understand what it is to have a humble mind. Yeah. So no matter how privileged you are, your riches, your comfort, all the things that you're entitled to, if you are able to look at people who have less than you do, and you have a wish to help them. So Shufu says, you have a wish to give, or rather in the Earth Sutra it says you have a wish to give, and you do so with great compassion, a humble heart, and a smile. And you don't even have to be the one doing it. Kings are usually very people who are very busy. They have a lot of things to do. So Shufu says that in Earth Sutra says that either they give with their own hands or they arrange for others to give. And then as you are giving, you are speaking gentle and sympathetic words. You are making the recipient feel good and happy to receive such things. So the result is that the blessing is comparable as you would give to Buddhas as numerous as the sand grains in 100 Ganges rivers. Why? Well, I guess, at least in my understanding, it comes back to it is linked to the practice of bowing. Normally we bow, it's very easy for us to bow to the Buddha. Why? Because that's the Buddha. Bowing to Shufu comes naturally. Why? Because that's Shufu, one worthy of respect, worthy of offerings, worthy of veneration. It is hard to bow to people who cause you afflictions. Okay, that's not right. People who cause you afflictions, because why? Their afflictions come from inside. Okay. So if you are able to treat someone who has in every way is inferior, not that you see them as inferior, but as how it's depicted in the Earth Store Sutra. These people have less, they're very unfortunate, but you do it with the same heart as if you were offering to a Buddha. Okay, there's no difference if you were making the same offerings to the Buddha. You treat these people in the same way and you make offerings to them. That's what makes the blessings comparable, as if they were Buddhas themselves. Okay, that's my theory. Yeah, if anyone has a theory or anything they would like to share, then please unmute or put it in the chat box. Okay, let's move on. So Shufu then, he says, these vows are familiar to everyone. That means the 4 great vows. Okay. And he says, what is more, they are the means by which all Buddhas attain realization. And they are the vows that all bodhisattvas cultivate. Okay. So the 4 great vows. What are the 4 great vows? Okay, let me go back to 4 slides. Okay, the first one is living beings are boundless. I vow to save them all, or I vow to save them. Okay. Second one, afflictions are endless. I vow to cut them off. All right. Third one, Dharma doors are measureless. I vow to learn them all. Okay. And then the fourth one is the Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to realize it. So those are the 4 great vows. So if you look at all the vows that bodhisattvas make, they all arise from these basic 4 vows. Okay, they're just variations based on these 4 vows. Why are they variations? Well, they're all different living beings. All the bodhisattvas all have different karmas, all have different ways of seeing the world, and that's why they make different vows. Okay. So now Shufu says there is another vow with which everyone is even more familiar. Okay, what is that vow? This is the vow. This is the Pure Land vow. Okay. It says, I vow to be reborn in the Pure Land with the 9 grades of lotuses as my father and mother. When the flower opens, I will see the Buddha and awaken to the unproduced. Irreversible bodhisattvas will befriend me. Okay. Why is Shufu giving us this vow? All right, that's what the next slide has. Shufu says, if everyone can make these vows every single day, I can guarantee that each of you will be able to meet the compassionate honored one. I guess he's talking about Amitabha Buddha. Obtain irreversibility and soon realize the Buddha way. Okay. Shufu gives you a guarantee. He says if you can make these vows every single day. Okay. But you know by now, if you've been following the classes from the beginning until now, making these vows is not just reciting them in your mouth. Okay. It has to lead to a transformation of your habits. It doesn't have to lead to a full transformation of your habits, but you must really you must really try. Okay, you must put in some effort. Okay, so what are the vows again? Okay, I vow to be reborn in the Pure Land with the 9 grades of lotuses as my father and mother. When the flower opens, I will see the Buddha and awaken to the unproduced. Irreversible bodhisattvas will befriend me. So what is this vow? This vow encompasses all the Pure Land practices. What are the Pure Land practices? Well, we kind of covered that in the first few classes that we had because people were really interested in the Pure Land. When we started the classes on um, Medicine Master Buddha Sutra, in the beginning, they talked about the Pure Land. So no, not in the beginning. There was a section on the Pure Land. So we kind of jump ahead and we covered the Pure Land first before we covered the vows. Okay, so if you want to know more about Pure Land and you want to make, how you say, you want Shufu's guarantee, then you should go on YouTube and follow some of the earlier classes. All right, it's almost 10 a.m. Here in Kuala Lumpur, and I need to be downstairs soon. So let me grab my handbell. We're going to transfer merit and bow. Okay, let me close this. Okay. Any questions, anyone? Randy, let me know if I answered your question, as well as Peggy and Miss Yap. You can always put it in the WhatsApp group. Okay, let's do dedication of merit. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light Dispel the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. All right, everyone, we will see you next week. Okay, Amitabha. Bye bye.